Hello, and welcome to Thursday Night Creepypastas. I'm your host, May McGee. I did not choose that title. And this is my co-host, Lord TFK.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We hope you're having a wonderful night. Now, let me give you a very quick idea of what this show is going to be. I personally have absolutely no idea about what a creepypasta is, and I'm sure many of you might not feel, many of you don't either. However, we're going to see if we can change that tonight. And, Megan, go forward. Let the audience know what you got for us tonight.
To be honest, about, 6 months ago, I didn't know what a creepypasta was either. But basically what it is, it's a series of stories spread across the internet used to instill fear or shock in the readers. Now, you can find them anywhere if you just Google creepypastas. There's multiple sites for them, and some of them are pretty good.
So, I mean, it's kind of like, it's creepypasta is what they're called. It's not like a slang name or something like that.
It's kind of a slang name. It comes from the term copypasta, meaning like a term or a phrase or sentences, pictures that are copied all over the internet.
Right then. Well, why don't you tell the audience about what you got in store for them tonight? It looks like you have something called the Expressionless, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and personally, I chose this one because it's the one that got me into creepypastas.
Well, that's a wonderful start then.
Yeah, it's pretty creepy and sinister if you really think it's a true story. So,
things happen. We'll find out the story about the Expressionless now.
In June 1972, a woman appeared in Sinai Hospital in nothing but a white, blood-covered gown. Now this, in itself, should not be too surprising, as people often have accidents nearby and come to the nearest hospital for medical attention. But there were two things that caused people who saw her to vomit and flee in terror. The first being that she wasn't exactly human. She resembled something close to a mannequin, but had the dexterity and fluidity of a normal human being. Her face was as flawless as a mannequin's, devoid of eyebrows and smeared in makeup. There was a kitten clamped in her jaws so unnaturally tight that no teeth could be seen, and the blood was still squirting out over her gown and onto the floor. She then pulled it out of her mouth, tossed it aside, and collapsed. From the moment she stepped through the entrance to when she was taken to the hospital room and cleaned up before being prepped for sedation, she was completely calm, expressionless, and emotionless. The doctor thought it best to restrain her until the authorities could arrive, and she did not protest. They were unable to get any kind of response from her, and most staff members felt too uncomfortable to look directly at her for more than a few seconds. But the second the staff tried to sedate her, she fought back with extreme force. Two members of the staff had to hold her down as her body rose up on the bed with the same blank expression. She turned her emotionless eyes towards the male doctor and did something unusual. She smiled. As she did, the female doctor screamed and let go out of shock. In the woman's mouth were not human teeth, but long, sharp spikes. Too long for her mouth to close fully without causing any damage. The male doctor stared at her for a moment before asking, "What the hell are you?" She cracked her neck down to one shoulder to observe him, still smiling. There was a long pause. The security had been alerted and could be heard coming down the hallway. As he heard them approach, she darted forward, sinking her teeth into the front of his throat, ripping out his jugular and letting him fall to the floor, gasping for air as he choked on his own blood. She stood up and leaned over him, her face coming dangerously close to his as his life faded from his eyes. She leaned closer and whispered in his ears, "I am God." The doctor's eyes filled with fear as he watched her calmly walk away to greet the security men. His last ever sight would be watching her feast on them one by one. The female doctor who survived the incident named her the Expressionless. There was never a sighting of her again.
Wow, what a great story to start off the show.
Well, let's just say that that's a very, very detailed explanation, and these are all originals, right? I mean,
Yep.
Just normal people getting together and just writing these stories.
Yeah, a lot of the authors are amateur authors who just have a story and they want to tell it, but can't get it published because it's a short story or they don't know how.
What I really enjoyed about this particular creepypasta in general is, I mean, the really great attention to detail. I mean, not really just the detail, it's just the comparisons, the metaphors being used, the fluid motions of a human being, but the face of a mannequin. It's something that, I mean, it's very eerie, and I think it's a very strange way to evoke emotion. As a matter of fact, as I was picturing this person, it's genuinely terrifying. No eyebrows, pasty white face, and then, come on, biting down on a kitty.
And who bites on a kitty, though?
Yeah, there you go.
But yeah, like the stories that I read, they're pretty much the one that we just heard. They're kind of gruesome. Some of them are in depth. They generally sound like they could be true stories.
And how does one really achieve that kind of an image? I mean, like you said, it's very possible for it to appear real. Where is that reality coming from? Because as I listen to it, it's not just the words, it's also the way how the story is being delivered, how the story is building up, how it fades away. Now, what do you think is the special ingredient that really evokes fear?
It's actually all in the artist. If the writer believes that they can make it sound real, if it seems real in their head, all they have to do is describe it on paper, and the reader will transcribe it and they'll understand it, and sometimes they'll even fear it.
Yeah. Now, I'd like to know a little more about how you started off. You said that this particular creepypasta is the one that really introduced you to creepypastas in general. What was so special about this one?
Well, to be honest, a friend of mine had posted on Facebook as a link. I was like, all right, yeah.
And when was this?
About 6 to 8 months ago. And that's what got me started. I messaged her and I was like, hey, is this real? What is this? She sent me a link to a website and just kind of exploded from there.
What an eerie way to get entertainment. But, well, I'm not one to judge. What else, I mean, for our listeners out there, what kind of surprises do you think you have in store for them as the time goes on? Because we just start now, right? There's going to be a lot more to come.
Oh, and this is just the start. I got some pretty good ones that I'm cooking up.
Is there anyone in particular that you'd like to give a quick mention about?
Oh, I got one. This one is my personal favorite because it's the only one that made me stop and think and kind of kept me up at night. It's called the Russian Sleep Experiment.
Sounds very sinister.
Oh, yeah, and the fact that it's set in World War II, Russian experimented on national spies, kind of makes it sound like it's something that could actually have happened.
Yeah, so this sleep experiment thing, I'm not going to ask you to explain this because I feel pretty uneasy at this point in time. With that expressionless face, I mean, come on. You're staying, especially for many students, living far away from home in a dingy little room, stuck. And then suddenly they reached, when you go on the internet, they have something very creepy, and then there's an immediate response. That's all right, I didn't need to sleep anyway.
It's pretty much how I feel when I read the stories.
And yet you continue to expose yourself to these tormenting details of the human mind. Well,
the human mind is a fascinating thing, and the fact that so much as a story can scare somebody into actually believing something is there when it's not.
I personally think that's pretty amazing, and the thing I'm really looking forward to hearing more of more of the creepypastas. However, there is one thing that really intrigues me, though. Whenever I listen to a narration, whether it's about creepypastas or about a story, the music is something that we tend to focus on a lot as well. How big of a part do you suspect the music might play to create that emotion there?
I'm hoping music will play a big part, but when I listen to narrations on other readers who are doing it, I find that the music kind of overpowers the vocal.
Mm-hmm.
My goal is to not do that because personally it's like you got to keep going back and you feel like you missed something important.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Now, one thing that we're doing is we're hopping all over the place. We just played the story of the Expressionless. Now, let's just go back in depth about that once again. Well, who is this writer that wrote this?
I actually don't know because there's very many versions of the story. The one that I found didn't have a writer attached to it.
Mm-hmm.
You can find versions that are written as if it's an actual news report. There are versions you can find on the creepypasta websites. And then there are versions you can just find on sites that have nothing to do with creepypastas. So it's a story that's been moved around.
If someone were to be pursuing this interest that you so vehemently love, where would you want them to start? Where's a good place to start?
Well, Creepypasta Wiki is a good place to start. They tend to try and get away from the fanfic creepypastas like Slender Man, but he's not evil. He's just kind of being stalked by some kids.
Let me interrupt you for a second there. Slender Man started off as a creepypasta?
No, nobody really knows the origin of Slender Man. He just kind of popped up. If you look on Wikipedia, which nobody really believes this,
Mm-hmm.
it says it started out as a meme. It was a group of people who wanted to create a meme, created Slender Man.
Yeah, and they created an international symbol for, well, terror in general.
And a lot of people would believe that that's how it was created because nobody knows the origin story.
What do you think compels individuals to really feel so deeply about these fictional worlds that they create for the viewers and for the readers? What do you think really evokes that desire to do that?
Well, for me, it's you feel like you have a story to tell, or it's a dream you had and you just like, man, that was really awesome.
Mm-hmm.
You want to write it down, you want to share it. It's mostly what happens. Other people, they do kind of want to instill fear and be like, how can I scare somebody
Really
today?
mess with this person's head, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, because, I mean, it's just the fact that I am God. Because I didn't personally read through this creepypasta before, but that statement, it's so ironic. I am God, which we think is the creator of life and everything that we know. But then she's biting down on a cat. And the amazing thing about this is the irony that's over there. Because God is what we look at as this benevolent, perfect being. And then suddenly in this, we're wrapping it down into basically a murder of sorts, if you will.
Well, in some urban legends, God is not as sugary sweet as people would love him to believe. He is a vengeful God. He is maleficent.
Why don't you tell me more about that? This is something I gotta find out. God's not good. God's not as good as we think he is. Continue.
Well, we're said to have been made in his own image, but we have wars, we have anger, we lash out. Why should we expect that the creator of us, in his own image, would create us different from him?
Yeah, it's really interesting the way how all of these different ideals really boil down into someone's mind frame, and then they come up with something like that. However, I must say that for an introduction to creepypastas, this was a really interesting way to go. What do you think our viewers might be expecting in the near future?
Well, I hope they expect what I'm actually going to give them, which is creepier stories, better stories, and maybe next time we'll have something better than this one.
How about someday we get a chance to listen to some of your originals?
Oh,
That
yeah.
we say.
I'll get some originals in there.
Oh, that's perfect. That's wonderful. But thank you again to all of our listeners to listen in. And I hope you guys have a wonderful night. And this is Lord TFK signing off.
And this is May McGee, and I'll see you later.